Paul here, once again with Jeremy Fox, expert on really all things psychology, but especially trauma, EMDR. And we are here on May 4th, right? With May the 4th be with you. I have to say that with a lisp. Oh, there are a lot of people joining. We are here to discuss on May 4th, May the 4th be with you, a psychoanalysis of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
And I can't take credit. This is Jeremy's idea. He told me that it is May 4th, and don't I understand what that's all about? And I'm like, no, what do you mean? And he says it's Star Wars Day. Tomorrow is May the Sith. The
Revenge
Sith
of the
be
Fifth.
with you. The revenge of the revenge of the fifth. The revenge of the fifth. So it's Jeremy's idea that we, continue our study of fictional characters and the stories they are in terms of a psychoanalytic viewpoint of them, an eclectic approach, let's say. So let me begin with this. A psychoanalytic perspective on Luke Skywalker explores his psychological development, motivations, and challenges. His journey from a farm boy on Tatooine to a Jedi Knight can be seen as a process of individuation. What we were talking earlier, everybody knows about the hero's journey. I mean, it's the classic. It's depicted, I think, even in Robert McKee's book Story, which is the Bible of Hollywood screenwriters, right? And also Joseph Campbell talks a lot about this, being the expert on Jung and the concept of this what he called a monomyth, meaning the ultimate myth that contains all other myths. The monomyth that Joseph Campbell coined is the model for screenwriting via the hero's journey. So Luke goes on a journey of self-discovery and integration of the self, with the Force acting as as the powerful force of his unconscious. Now, I've never heard it quite written that way, because that directly ties to why I wanted to talk to Jeremy tonight when he asked me, what movie or TV show should we look at? For some reason, I was thinking a lot through the weekend of the Odyssey and of the Greek character Odysseus. So I wrote to Jeremy and I said, hey, if you want to talk tonight, let's do something that is an Odyssey in film. What would an Odyssey in film be that you can think of? Well, many of them. We already covered John Wick, and Jeremy immediately said, well, Luke Skywalker, that's an Odyssey, right?
Yeah.
So I want to mention Odysseus somewhere in here tonight, and what I call the Odysseus instinct in males, and why I call it that. So interesting that it's integration of the self, the force representing the powerful force of the unconscious. That's really Jungian, right? Because Jungians say that when you come to understand your shadow self, your shadow side, that's exceptionally powerful. That's part of individuating, when you don't turn to the dark side, you join together your full self, the shadow self, meaning the parts of yourself you are unaware of, which technically, literally, is your unconscious, right? If you're unconscious of something, you are not aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So to bring the unconscious conscious is what Jung was talking about, by integrating the shadow. And that, in almost those literal terms, this is throughout the early films by George Lucas, the ones I'm most familiar with from when I was a child and was a huge fan of. Jeremy and I were talking. I'm not as big a fan of what came after that because of the writing largely, but anyway. Luke struggles with anger, fear, and his father's legacy, and these highlight potential Oedipal conflicts. It can't be more obviously Oedipal than that, than Luke and his father. And the need to overcome inner darkness. And what is inner darkness? Inner darkness is the force of narcissism. And I think what's great about this, just and I'll end with my little intro. What's great about this psychoanalytic depiction of Luke and saying that overcoming the Oedipal conflict and the need to overcome inner darkness. What's great about that is, I think talk about narcissism all the time these days. And some of our colleagues like Natalie Martinek, shout out to her, doing innovative writing on this. That is the force of darkness. So, anytime in a story where there's darkness, there's evil, there's Dracula, there's a monster. I think we've covered before, the very first person that spurred me into psychiatry was a professor named Horatio Fabrega at the University of Pittsburgh, and he's unfortunately deceased. But he he told me, he's an unusual psychiatrist. When I first met him for a rotation, and I said, "What's unusual about you?" And he said, "Well, I'm kind of a vampire hunter." And and I'm like, "Really? You're a psychiatrist and vampire hunter? What exactly does that mean?" And he said, "Well, I'm an anthropologic psychiatrist." And I said, "I've never heard of that either. What is an anthropologic psychiatrist?" He studied world cultures and the anthropology that integrates with psychiatry and psychology. And he said a lot of what he had studied up to that point was monster myths. And his statement to me was, every culture of the world throughout all history, even very isolated cultures, island cultures, they all have monsters. They all have monster myths. And these all represent simply the force of narcissism
Yes.
in any collective group of people and in an individual, because one analogous model of how do you look at narcissism is to say it's like being a child in an adult's body. It's being
Mm.
immature of character is what it is. A different way of putting it would be to say, much like children or toddlers or infants, what comes to the fore and dominates behavior is the unconscious. It's the instincts that dominate. The younger we are, yeah, right. Like Freud called it the id. The id is the instincts, is the unconscious, including Jung's unconscious. And so the more immature we are, the more dominated by instinct and reflex we are. And
Yeah.
when embodied in an adult, it is evil.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
thing, the behaviors and actions of childhood, when embodied in an adult, approach evil, or at least wrongfulness, or in religious circles, in spirituality, sin.
Right.
So to be run by your instincts alone, without ethics, without kindness, loving kindness, goodness to others, wisdom, patience, all the character features of adulthood, the absence of character
Mhm.
leaves only id,
Right.
leaves instinct, right? And
Yeah.
this is exactly what Luke Skywalker contends with as he grows through the
Mhm.
hero's journey. Is he on the force of light or the force of darkness, right? And his father chose darkness. So take it away, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at so the interesting thing about the original trilogy is that we get a fake out where Luke Skywalker starts out as essentially, from what we think, an orphan. Well, it turns out his father's still alive in a certain form. His mother isn't alive anymore. So he saves the princess in the first movie, right? Who turns out to be his sister. But for then, it's like he gets the girl, he gets the princess. He goes on he answers the call to the hero's journey. Okay. He engages in like this space age swashbuckling tale. And then the interesting thing is that there is no love interest for him He starts out, you think there's a princess element, literally. Can't get much more archetypal, knight saves the princess and earns her love than that. But then we get a little bit of a switch in The Empire Strikes Back, where it's more about Luke actually confronting his father, when he finds out it's Darth Vader and he finds out Leia's his sister, and then Leia becomes kind of Han Solo's love interest. And so it becomes way more about Luke's interior journey as a hero. It becomes way more about his introspection in Empire Strikes Back than it ever was in the first movie, which I think is pretty fascinating. And we see that Luke integrates his relationship with his father. Initially they fight and Darth Vader drops the bomb on Luke like I'm your father, which just absolutely floors him, just as it would. It really devastates Luke, who goes on to process that trauma and that information through training and directing that traumatic revelation into his own growth. And then he learns to integrate his dark side. He has that vision when he goes to train that when he takes the head off Darth Vader and the helmet explodes, it's his own face, meaning that's the darkness he holds inside too, like his father did. And so we see Luke, though, go on to encapsulate them, be able to integrate the shadow self and then forgive his father, blah, blah, blah. We know what happens. He saves the day and it becomes his journey, and there isn't that romance element. And why do I keep bringing that up? Because in the prequels,
Hmm.
we see Anakin,
Yeah.
Luke's father, who didn't have a father himself. He was born of the Force through a woman, and so
Huh.
automatically no father figure from the prequels with
I
Anakin.
didn't even know that.
Yeah, so Anakin doesn't have a father biologically. He grows up
Huh.
a slave. He has a lot of internalized anger from that experience, and really, you see a happy kid in the prequels, but his mother is killed by the Tusken Raider people, which sets Anakin off on his first dark impulse to basically seek revenge. I mean, which is understandable at that point. It's more of an
Yeah.
anti-hero type impulse. And so essentially, so then
Right.
Anakin falls deeply in love with the Queen of Naboo, Queen Amidala, played by Natalie Portman. And they begin a relationship. And it's very fascinating because Anakin has a preoccupied, anxious attachment. And that's been gone over in different video creators. Different video creators have talked about that. I want to give credit, especially Charisma on Command. It's talked about like anxious attachment, how Anakin Skywalker had that, which is dead on. So Anakin basically breaks the Jedi code of not having attachments. And not only does he have an attachment, it's a very strong romantic one. And Emperor Palpatine essentially gives Anakin like transfers through will horrible premonitions of Padme dying to the point that Anakin can't sleep, becomes obsessed with preventing her from dying, and that becomes his tragic flaw, like the Greek, the Achilles heel, the tragic flaw of great heroes. So Anakin's is his preoccupation with stopping his wife from dying. So you
Huh.
see that romantic element in
Wow.
Anakin's journey really throws things off of his
His his
preoccupation.
his wife, aka mother. His
Yes.
wife, aka mother, right? Because isn't he essentially what is called an Oedipal victor? Anakin's
Yeah.
an Oedipal victor, right?
Yeah, expound on that a little bit for
So
the
is this
audience.
what
That's a good one.
happens when one? Okay, so
Uh-oh, I'm losing you.
yeah, do you hear me?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay, so
Yes.
to
Can you hear me?
paraphrase and simplify, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So to paraphrase and simplify, what is the Oedipus? It would be to say that it is the point at which attached to the opposite sex parent, the opposite biologic sex parent, and in making one's way through that process, learns to identify instead, and this moves them away from uh, the intense, passionate feelings that Freud called desire, but it's not sexual desire. It's just intensity, passionate enmeshment with between the two parents, possibly has quite a bit in common with the opposite sex parent. So an Oedipal victor for the male, it would be different for the female. But for a male, an Oedipal victor is somebody who intensely attaches to the mother. And in the case of Anakin, there is no father. There's not even a literal biological origin of his sense of self. It's the force itself. And he just stays attached to her and is never what I would call initiated out of that. He never finds a figure to identify with to pull
Ah,
him away from the mother.
well, here's what's interesting about that. Oh man. Okay. Is my video freezing on you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yours is on me. Yes.
We got to figure this out at some point. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So, um, I would say he does find Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is a little bit close in age. They become more like brothers, even though it starts out as a mentorship for Obi-Wan toward Anakin. Qui-Gon could have been that, but as we know, Darth Maul kills Qui-Gon Jinn, who could have been more the father figure. Now, Yoda and Mace Windu both fail Anakin because they come off as very cold and very legalistic in the Force religion. It's basically, this is the way, don't have fear.
Ah,
Yeah, they come off as very dismissive, and so Qui-Gon is a lot better father figure, and Yoda and Mace Windu, if you rewatch those, listeners, you'll see, like, Mace Windu is a bit of an ass to Anakin generally, and it's set up that way on purpose because basically the Jedi were due for a fall by the lore of the universe. It was like Luke will bring not Luke, Anakin will bring balance to the force. Well, what that meant was a kind of leveling of what was
yeah.
going on with the Jedi. And so they were kind of a bureaucracy. So essentially at that point, um, Yoda was a bit headstrong and he got really humbled as we
Well,
see.
false fathers.
And Mace Windu was basically thrown out of a building. And so and we don't hear from him again in the series. Now his actor, Samuel L. Jackson, says Mace survived that, so I'm not gonna go there. Whatever you believe on that. But suffice to say, the Jedi didn't quell Anakin's, um, massive anger in a way that a good father figure could have with a rebellious teen son, if we're going that direction, which I think is a good one to talk about. So,
Hmm.
I mean, Anakin wasn't so Obi-Wan Kenobi became a really good mentor to Luke, and that worked. I mean, he was a great one to Anakin, but so much was happening with Anakin's fear and paranoia that he was hooked into the fear of losing his wife so much. Whereas with Luke, I don't see the same massive fear, sort of trauma stuff that he deals with in the trilogy. If viewers have thoughts on that, that's fine. Our viewers here. I know he didn't have an easy life. I mean, for goodness sake, he grew up basically thinking he was an orphan. He had foster parents. He had a tough life. He grew up as basically like his dad did, which is the sadness of it all. But
Yeah.
once he got on his hero's journey, um, I don't know that he was tested the same way with with some kind of massive loss. So I have to give Anakin a break on that one. I mean, he became so paranoid in episode 3. He didn't figure that it was like someone sending him infectious premonitions. Like, it would seem obvious now to think,
Well,
well,
what if you had a loss that you did not know was the massive which is the absence of a father in the first place. Our friend, our mutual friend, Rob Henderson talks about this a lot, having grown up in foster care in Los Angeles, California, and never met his father. I don't think he knows who his father is,
Okay.
possibly, if I recall that correctly. So for Anakin, and known many people like this, or I've known many patients that start out today where there's such pessimism that my traumatic problem is so deep and original and has no solution. There's no reworking it, reliving it, and making it go right. Uh, the rest, but in the case of Anakin, he was born by the Force with a woman, right? So how do you overcome that psychologically? If you literally have no father to even read the memoir of, or the diary of, or to have the mother tell you what he was like, because he didn't exist. He literally didn't exist. It was parthenogenesis, right?
Yeah. Um, let's see. Okay, so Geraldine said you're cutting out. Do you have okay. That room is so
I'm
cool,
cutting
but
out.
every yeah. That room is really cool with the backdrop, but I'm okay. Um
I'll try something
okay.
here. Let's try this.
Yeah. While you're trying that, I would say that it's a tough
How's
one
this?
because oh,
Is this better?
yeah, what happened? That's great.
I went from home internet to my second phone
Yeah,
as the
sometimes
internet.
yeah, I
Go
think so.
figure.
I have to do that. I have to
I
use
mean,
hotspot sometime. Yeah. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so if we look at his influences, Anakin had a really loving mother, and he had a literal slave owner for the male figure, Watto, the flying Toydarian that was like such an interesting, like flying mini elephant from the first movie. And Watto was kind of like portrayed as this tough, but kind of not loving by any stretch, but not like a tormentor. So I think that would have been even darker as he was
It
much more
reminds me of a bad stepfather.
right. So
When you were talking
basically,
about these things, I keep putting it into like a nuclear family context for comparison for myself, and then Freud and the Oedipus, and some Jung too. And what I kept thinking about while you were saying all this about Anakin,
yeah,
you're more well versed in what happens with these characters and even their names than I am. I got lost in George Lucas's dialogue and that whole series, where Anakin was a boy and then a teenager.
yeah,
Um,
great
but
movies, really good
but
movies.
what but what well, maybe I'll see them again. But what you made me think of was the data on, remember, middle of the bell curve is the average. There are outliers, but the
Yeah.
data on the mortality rate of stepchildren,
Okay.
that there's a 5 times higher mortality rate when the father is a stepfather. It doesn't mean specific individual stepfathers are bad. It doesn't mean all stepfathers are bad. It doesn't necessarily even mean directly. Correlation is not causation, but it doesn't necessarily mean, the average stepfather is bad. But the data says, at least last I looked over 5 years ago, that there's a 5 times mortality rate when one lives with stepfather instead of biological father. Okay.
Sure.
So that made me think. I thought of that when you're telling me about Anakin was born of the Force and a woman.
Yeah.
He has these slave owner elephant people,
Yeah.
Wangu, Wadu, the
Watto.
mean
Yeah, Watto.
Watto, yeah. I mean, I thought of stepfathers and I thought of that data.
Yeah, I mean, so to take that further down the rabbit hole, Watto bet Anakin in a pod race, and Anakin won it in episode 1, and that was one of the big set pieces was the for its time and still pretty good, pod race scene through that big canyon, and Anakin kind of using the Force, I think. It was kind of it's very interesting because it's
Ah,
symmetrical, right? So, like, Luke
right.
Skywalker in the first movie has to use the Force to destroy the Death Star. His father's basically like a big
Creation.
yeah. Well, so and yes and no, like the deaths, yes, we'll talk about that. But um at least what his father was presiding over at that point for sure. And then so good point. So it's weird. At the end of episode 3, we see Darth Vader looking at the creation of the Death Star with Palpatine. So they'd gotten I don't it'd be interesting like when that got started. Well, we know Rogue One has something to do with that too. But so we see in episode 1, Anakin is like 9 or 10 years old, is piloting this pod racer, which is really a cool thing. And he's, almost loses the race, but I think it's a showing that he can like use the force to race. And like that was his relationship to the force, much like his sons would be flying an X-Wing, you
All
know.
right. Yeah.
But you see it's you betting someone on a race is pretty, like, low, value, right? Like, that you would take
Yeah.
that,
The
and
stakes are low
right,
for
like, if
for
you
the universe, let's say.
yeah,
Yeah.
so, um, I think you have a cocktail, and Lucas was good for this. I think Lucas really did a good job with a lot. I mean, anybody could make a few mistakes that you don't like in a movie. Most people don't make movies, so it's easy to criticize, but
Right.
I'm not saying that about you, I'm saying about people who just think that so the prequels from my generation are beloved, and they're like Dar Palpatine is one of the best villains of all time, I'm convinced, and we could talk about that on another episode, but basically, Anakin being portrayed as a trauma-riddled youth who has a massive spark more than a spark, the flame of potential, and he even channels it, but he has very kind of emotionally dismissive father figures in the Jedi Council that at a crucial moment, when he's being courted by Palpatine, who comes across as a great father figure, who, as we know, becomes the darkest figure in the galaxy, tall order, you know, to be that dark. But Palpatine says, "Use my power, save your wife, save Padme," which Anakin should have immediately sensed. He should have had red flags like, "Well, how will you know that? You're the one giving me the premonitions that she's going to die. You're giving me false premonitions on
Uh,
something and manipulate." But
okay.
anyway,
Yeah.
Palpatine swoops in, much like young boys can get pulled into gangs, right? Palpatine swoops in when Anakin's probably like what, 21, 20, however old he is in the third movie, which is an amazing movie, by the way, episode 3, the third prequel one that caps it off. Great film, great tragedy, if you like. I mean, it's a Greek tragedy movie. So basically, Palpatine comes in, we see how he hooks in Anakin, and he listens and provides comfort, even though it's in a psychopathic, instrumental way, when none of the other father figures in his life are
Well,
listening.
it's a narcissistic father. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the narcissistic father. I mean, all
yeah,
the things you're saying are what we've been talking about for a year intermittently. The terminology of narcissistic abuse, right? The
yeah,
fog, the manipulation, the putting words in your head, and
yeah,
then actions are going to follow those words, like a deception by by
100%.
by Palpatine.
Yes,
But it is a Greek tragedy,
yeah.
like you said.
People are
And
susceptible to words. Go ahead. What were you gonna say? Sorry.
well, I just want to say, a few other, from researching this prior to coming on here, some interesting bullet points.
Mhm.
Early life in the Oedipal complex, Luke's upbringing on Tatooine, away from his father, mirrors a classic Oedipal scenario. He seeks to establish his identity and independence, a process that's often facilitated by a strong connection with his mother, Aunt Beru, and the
Yeah.
authority of Obi-Wan Kenobi,
Mm.
according to International Psychoanalyst Journal. The force and the unconscious. The force can be interpreted as representing the unconscious mind, a realm of primal instincts, emotions, and hidden desires. Luke's integrating the force, or Luke's training with Yoda and Obi-Wan, is a process of integrating the force, both
Yep.
its positive and negative aspects, to achieve self-awareness. So being aware of the potential for the wrongful use of that kind of power. But it's saying, just like Jung said, and every Hollywood screenwriter says through story, the power of the instincts is massive. Facing the shadow, the revelation that Darth Vader is his father forces Luke to confront his dark side, the part of his
Yes.
personality that's repressed and feared. The process of integrating his shadow is crucial for achieving wholeness. And I thought you would like this one: overcoming trauma. Luke experiences significant trauma, including the loss of his parents, his aunt and uncle, and the need to find meaning and resilience in the face of adversity. Well, that goes without saying. So I thought all of that was, interesting from a general psychoanalytic framework. But the thing that made me want to get with you tonight in the first place on this subject was Oedipus, or I'm sorry, Odysseus. Odysseus. I wanted to think about an Odyssey, and I wanted to think about a specific instinct that we've been giving labels to these instincts. And I want to give a shout out to Aramis, because Aramis did a lot of great, comments to you and I, Jeremy, in previous podcasts. Aramis really liked the Batman stuff. You were talking about Batman versus Superman and this sort of thing. And I thought it was worth mentioning tonight that anytime I talk about Greek deities as nomenclature for what we're calling, and I'm calling, masculine instincts and feminine instincts, the nomenclature is great nomenclature because it's so old and it's so well developed as a set of stories. But I thought it was worth mentioning that modern superheroes always have some kind of basis in a Greek deity. Their superpowers sometimes are almost identical to Greek deities. Like Superman is Zeus, Spider-Man is Apollo, by the
Mm.
way.
Right.
Apollo is the educated Renaissance man, the Renaissance god of the arts and sciences. Spider-Man was all about being a student of the sciences and
Yes.
developing contraptions. Although there's overlap as well with Iron Man, with Tony Stark being an inventor, but he's a more mature inventor. Tony Stark probably the closest. Iron Man probably has the closest, um, is the closest analog to what I call the Odysseus instinct in males. So Odysseus is the ancient Greek demigod who lived the Odyssey and essentially lived an adventure. So you could hear modern recent researchers into male psychology talk about risk taking
Yes.
tendencies in males, physical risk taking in males. That's an aspect of this Odysseus instinct that I'm talking about, the risk taking, because
Sure.
Odysseus most certainly did that, was just striking out into the unknown, um, with his um, with his ship of sailors, leading them through various adventures and winning treasure, and winning the love of nymphs and facing monsters, the Scylla and Charybdis, facing the sirens, living adventures and making discoveries, and kind of discovering rewards, earning rewards through discovering them. And so I'd say, besides being a risk-taking God who has complete freedom, the freedom of the high seas, being on the high seas, where do you want to sail next? What adventure do you want to have next? Let's see what happens. Let's be a team. I'm a leader. Let's be a team and let's set sail. So it's freedom, but it's also discovery.
Yeah.
It's the you could say it's not just risk taking, it's novelty seeking, but it also has an aspect that is intensely curious. You might even say mechanically. You know how who was it that said women are about people, men are about things?
I think it was
Girls are,
Simon Baron Cohen, wasn't it? It might.
I think it may have been. I thought it might have been Eric Byrne or somebody else,
It might
but
be. No, it might
you
be.
know, yeah, but if girls and women are about people generally on a bell curve, if you had to just narrow to that one trait as the descriptor, and men are about things and boys are about things, then the intensity of Legos, like why do people like Legos and why do boys like Legos and why is it so intense a curiosity about them, or video games and how they work and mechanics and pulling things apart and understanding the mechanics of a thing.
I found it.
Why do you care? Who was it?
So I'm going to blow your mind, and this might blow the
Okay.
audience. So it's
I
Simon
hope
Baron
it's not
Cohen.
oh,
What? What?
I
No,
hope
who'd you?
it's not Brene Brown. Please
Oh,
don't say it was Brene
that's
Brown.
funny. No, it was
Ah,
actually a book,
joke.
"The Essential Difference: The Truth About the Male and Female Brain" by Simon Baron Cohen. So, and he actually writes about it that the female brain is type E, empathizing, and the male brain is type S, systematizing. So it's a whole book about it
Whoa.
from
By
Amazon.
si- by Simon Baron Cohen.
Absolutely, who wrote about 0-degree empathy in autism, psychopathy, narcissism,
Right.
borderline
Right.
personality disorder, which is a great book. It's called The Science of Evil. It's a really good book, by the way. I've read quite a bit of it years ago. I might go revisit it.
Wow. Wow, that's cool.
So
I
our
will
book
as
club
well.
is coming up. What?
I will as well.
Very cool.
That's
Yeah.
that's great. But yeah, but the idea here that I'm talking about, and I'm curious about whether what this sparks for you, the concept of on a bell curve,
Hmm.
males having an instinctual sense of curiosity about the mechanics of things, how do things work, and if I dare, now back to Luke Skywalker, why I think he is in part the Oedipus instinct, uh, made human, is I'm going to go on an odyssey because, and I'm afraid to. This is the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell and Jung, right?
Yeah.
There's hesitation at first. There's refusal of the call at first, the call to step through a threshold until you're forced to because your aunt and uncle's house has been burnt down while you were away. They're dead, and there is no home now. You must embark on your odyssey now. But it's about daring to cross into the unknown as a young man trying to become a wise man, trying to grow and integrate the shadow and integrate the light. Um, and once you cross that threshold, now what will you discover and what will you learn? And you have to have freedom to do so, or you won't learn anything and you won't discover anything. So compare to Anakin, who is born a slave, right? You told me this.
Yeah, he
He
was.
he's born
Absolutely.
he's born into slavery, so he does not have freedom. So he remains narcissistic because he never does grow. But he can't use the Odysseus instinct. He can't become acquainted with it ever. Only
Mhm.
just a false imitation of it, because he never had freedom in his mind. He never gave himself freedom. So freedom is a male instinct. And you see this play out in culture, in marriages around the world today, in pop culture. The concept of a man cave
Yes.
is, um, the place for the man to go where he can have mental freedom, freedom from whatever is outside that cave. And that ripples into Batman and the Batcave and things like
Sure.
this. There are old terminologies that, that are derogatory, like a married man would jokingly say 50 years ago, 80 years ago, my ball and chain,
Yeah.
the spouse who holds me down, which
Yeah.
is a good thing to build a family and a home.
Sure.
But there's always going to be some aspect in pair bonding that is going to hold the person back from the freedom of singledom. And for this Odysseus instinct, the instinct to go discover the world, travel the world, discover new lands, discover new things, including about yourself, and an inventive spirit as well, wanting to produce some life's work that is innovative, right?
Yes.
What a lot of men call their life's mission. Whatever your life's mission
Yeah.
is going to be your discovery to give to the
Absolutely.
world. And in the hero's journey, it's the great boon that you bring back to the world of the living, that you bring back to the surface world, the ordinary world, it's called.
So Anakin built C-3PO in episode 1. That was a massive,
I did not
huge.
know that.
He built
Anakin
C-3PO.
built C3PO. Ha! That's
Absolutely. In
crazy.
fact,
Didn't know that.
he did. And
Huh.
so basically that was his first taste of invention as a child. So he built him piece by piece, and he didn't have the gold plating yet. He was totally naked and of wires, and so he gets the gold plating later. But anyway, um, so Anakin's on that track. So he starts out a slave, and then he goes immediately into the Jedi Order. So from one kind of slavery into harsh order with little to no freedom. Okay, now albeit
Sounds like
much.
Rob Henderson,
Well, there you go. That's a
like
really good point. So
going from foster child into a Jedi Order
the
of
military.
Oxford, Yale. Well, the military first,
Yeah.
then Oxford and Yale. The which I guess I'm saying they're like the Empire.
Well, so then Anakin does that,
um,
and then think about it. He ends up getting it. I mean, you could say, but when college students get a taste of freedom, if they had really strict backgrounds, they often do what? Party, flunk out.
yes,
The best thing
yes,
parents can do is dose their kids on freedom so that they don't get drunk on it later on in life, because Anakin is so strictly controlled that when
uh-huh.
the emperor offers him, be your own God. The lie of the snake in the Garden of Eden, by the way, the oldest
Mm.
lie, become your own God. Anakin's like, oh yeah, okay. So, but he was also under duress from fearing Padme's death. So you have the perfect squeezing
Yes,
of someone who is really interested in freedom and doesn't understand so the Jedi represent utter emotional cold control, and the Sith represent utter id instinct. So really, if you want me, I don't know if somebody said this before. I hope I'm the first live on air saying it. Timestamp for all eternity. The Jedi are the super ego and the harsh, uptight, anal retentive. The Sith are the id. What you don't hear about is the ego that takes the dark side and the light side and makes it something that's useful. So that's my view. The Jedi in the prequels are portrayed as stuffy, uptight adults. They're bureaucratic. Yes, they save the day, but they have a council that talks everything to death and is uptight. And then the Sith are so ravaged by their own appetite that they have a rule of two where only two can exist because they are so evil and appetitive, appetite driven, that only
yeah,
two can sustain themselves. And the master is always teaching one and not enough so that they know everything. And the student is always trying to learn enough to kill the master and then become the new
huh?
master. So that's the
Well,
rule of two.
isn't that the Oedipus itself right there?
Ah, yeah,
The son will kill the father. I mean, the
very good
story
point.
of Oedipus in the Greek tragedy is the son
Yeah,
kills the father, marries the mother, And Freud
Yep,
borrowed that to say the son will not literally kill the father. This is all symbolism. He
of
will
course.
surpass the father someday.
Yes.
He
Yes.
will my son is probably already surpassing me in a lot of ways. But the son will surpass the father, which is to kill the father
Right. So what do you
symbolically.
do? Yeah, so what do you do if you don't ever want that to happen? Well, if you're Palpatine, you make sure that your son figure, your apprentice, all has an emotional wound that's so great that they always seek your validation, and that will
Ah,
grow up. The
yeah,
devouring father versus
yeah,
the overbearing mother who right now we're really getting into some interesting stuff. Like you keep your child so emotionally dependent
yeah,
that no matter how great they are otherwise, their maturity isn't there to say, I can step out of your shadow. Now, the great triumph of Star Wars is Darth Vader snaps back into Anakin and throws the Emperor into that shaft to do what? Pass on the torch to his son and say, get out of the shadow. I'm going to get out of the shadow of my surrogate father figure, the Emperor, to be a father to my son. Very huge growth moment, and that's considered like the zenith of the Star Wars original trilogy. Is that redemption of Anakin in the
when does that
service of
happen?
that's
That's in the third
in the third
film.
final, yeah, the third of the original series. Yes, Darth
Okay,
Vader saves Luke from the Emperor and throws
right.
the Emperor down the mine shaft or whatever, not the mine shaft, the shaft in the Death Star
Yes,
to his doom. So, and that's why people hate, for one reason among many, the new sequel trilogy, not the prequels, because they bring back the Emperor when the whole thing of the original trilogy was he's gone, banished by Darth Vader in a final act of goodness. So people don't like that that was undone, which I understand. If you look at it from the story archetype perspective, they brought back this evil archetype who was
right.
dealt
That's
with
the end.
perfectly. Yes.
Yeah, that's the
So
end.
yeah.
Yeah, which almost reminds you of like generational trauma,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like that gets passed down for uh, the all the studies of the Holocaust and those who are descendants
Yep.
of survivors, and how generational trauma works.
Yes.
Um, and then there's all kinds of places to see this, and racism, American slavery, any slavery anywhere in the world that goes for centuries. Um, hmm, wow.
Well, you know who? Okay, here's another mind blow moment. So Darth Vader has a grandson whose name is Kylo Ren, aka Ben Solo, because he's the son of Han Solo and Anakin's daughter, Princess Leia. Right. So talk about generational
Oh,
trauma. Kylo Ren becomes the villain of the new trilogy, and he never met his grandfather, obviously, who died. Anakin slash Darth Vader dies
oh,
in
so that's Adam Driver.
yes.
Ah,
He
yeah, kind of like
becomes
you. He's a
yeah,
little bit like you.
yes. I've gotten that comparison, especially when I grow the hair back out. I went as him last Halloween and put it on Instagram. It was a bit I
No.
really enjoyed it. I finally did that. Yes. So he is in this like, oh, I want to be like Darth Vader. He idealizes that figure. And it's very fascinating. Talking about generational trauma. He has that dark side capability. And guess what? This is another reason people don't like the sequels. So um Luke Skywalker, who saves his father, Darth Vader, almost kills Kylo Ren because he suspects the dark side in him. Wait a minute, didn't Luke already know? Like even Darth Vader had good in him, and Darth Vader killed thousands, maybe millions. If you put Darth Vader in charge of the Death Star, not just the Emperor, then it's
Yeah,
millions because they blew up a whole freaking planet. But then
right.
Luke Skywalker is
Could be
with
billions.
right.
Yeah.
So Luke Skywalker stands above Kylo Ren's bed with his lightsaber drawn, freaks the hell out of Kylo Ren, obviously, that his own uncle would try to kill him, and then Kylo Ren goes down the dark side path. So, I mean, think about it that way. Like that really was an inciting event. Imagine
No, wait.
someone.
How old was he then, Kylo Ren,
I think he
as the
was
character?
probably. I think he was like preteens. He was pretty young. This was not
Oh,
like, but I
really?
don't think he was like 5. So
So some other actor played him. It wasn't Adam Driver playing
I
him at
think it
that
was
point.
age regressed. I think it was like maybe a deep fake, like computer generation.
Okay. So is that somehow similar? What popped to mind was the story of Isaac, Abraham and Isaac sacrificing
Oh,
Isaac.
okay.
Is that similar somehow? Like if Luke Skywalker is going to kill his young child relative because he's told by the Force to do so, and then he doesn't,
Ah, that's
isn't
a
that
really
Abraham and Isaac?
interesting. Because of the fact that I don't know if there was any symbolic reason like it was the Force telling. I think it was Luke's paranoia was what it was seen as
Well, why
in.
why did he not succeed in killing Kylo Ren at a young age?
I looked it up and it says it was like when Ben, aka Kylo, was 24. That's interesting. So I don't know.
Okay.
I think it was supposed to be that Luke didn't
Did he
have the
hesitate?
faith. He hesitated, and so I think it was a reverse. I think it was
A
actually
re-
a reverse version of uh,
Abraham and Isaac.
Abraham and Isaac
Right.
because Luke didn't have enough faith that he could keep Kylo good, whereas Abraham was operating only on faith. But
Right.
Luke
The
isn't. Luke
story,
doesn't.
the way the
Yeah,
quickly the way the story goes is God tells Abraham for unknown reasons, you must have faith in me, and I am now telling you, go and sacrifice
yes.
your only son. Sacrifice your son Isaac on the mountaintop. And
Well,
Abraham
yeah,
is so faithful and obedient, he's going to do so. And
yes,
at the last minute,
yeah,
he's proven himself enough that
yes,
he's willing to sacrifice his son because he's told to. And God suddenly said, "Nope, nope, just kidding, don't do it. Not just
yeah.
kidding, but don't do it."
Well,
Um,
right, and
then
it's
Isaac
interesting
is
because
saved
yes, absolutely.
and blessed
So
because you are so faithful, Abraham. You were willing to do that. I'm going to give you, you know, honor. I'm going to honor you and your descendants. Right.
yeah.
That's that story. So Kylo Ren is not really Isaac. It's a reverse Isaac kind of thing.
Well, so I'm looking here online, and essentially, so Luke sensed that Kylo had darkness in him and was going to do dark things. Had like a premonition. By the way, here's the deal: Anakin had a premonition of Padme dying. What did he do? Went to the dark side out of fear. Luke had a premonition about Kylo Ren having darkness. Almost kills him. Doesn't. That inciting event drives Kylo, among things, I'm guessing, to the
Yeah.
dark side. So it's interesting how the Skywalker males have this history of and a pattern of paranoia that
Fear.
causes what? Yeah, fear.
Well, fear, I mean, for all of us, for all humans, right?
Yeah.
Fear tends to cloud the functioning of the cortex, the prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobes from being logical and cool, calm, collected, reasonable, logic based. And the
Yes.
amygdala starts ringing the alarm bell. And where do we go immediately? Our instincts. The dark side, the dark side is our instincts unchecked by guidance from the conscious mind,
Yes.
including good boundaries, ethics, wisdom, win-win behavior, constructiveness, maturity. Yeah, it's
Boundaries?
not
You must have
the key is. Oh God, are you
boundaries.
getting ready for your next Halloween costume? Are you planning it already?
Too tall for Yoda. I'm gonna stick to Kylo. More. Ah! Anybody saw the sequels? That's a reference to that. Yeah.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
Yoda.
yeah.
Yoda's a nut. Yoda's so annoying in the
I think one of the
original.
greatest phrases out of the entire enterprise is "I know." Where's that from? I know.
I don't what
Han Solo. I'm not saying it right. But he's
oh
about to
no,
be
it's I
frozen in
love you. I
carbonite.
know. What is it?
I know. No, she said Princess Leia says, "I love you."
Yeah.
And he goes, I know.
Yeah, that was cool. That would
That was
be
improvised. That was improvised. Entirely
yeah,
improvised. Yeah, by Harrison Ford. It was supposed to be "I love you too," of
yeah.
course.
They really
um,
ruined him too, and so, like, he it's so sad when I saw The Force Awakens,
yeah,
it was so
yeah.
sad to see that he had gone back to being like he just taken the Millennium Falcon and driving it around, and, he wasn't with, um, Princess Leia anymore. It was very tragic because he'd done so much in Return of the Jedi, and then,
Right,
he
but that's
so
that's our modern depiction of the divorced dad. He's a loser who drives his car around, and
divorced you are. Yoda, marriage therapist.
you like that Yoda
I
voice
do.
little too much.
$400 for therapy, you will pay. Yo, no way, Yoda. I'm not paying that for a couple session. I'm just kidding. Yoda, couples therapist. Do or do
Yeah.
not. There is no try to love each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, really,
Well,
like Yoda's great. He's so funny. It's such a goofy accent, like a goofy way of speaking, the reverse thing. That's such a gimmick, man. But it worked. I'm doing it.
oh yeah, yeah, that's good. It's like anyway, used to call it pig Latin,
Oh yeah, ixnay on the
right?
last
River
way.
Ixnay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
A little bit like
Oh,
that.
man, that's what kids used to do before they had cell phones, just speaking cute little languages. How about that? Ooh, what a world that was, right? It just is 20 something years ago, man. Wasn't ancient
Yes.
history. No, I love this. I mean, so essentially the Odysseus instinct to take adventure, I mean, you have to have authentic freedom to choose adventure. I like that point. I like that you introduced that. And if you don't have freedom to choose, you can't heed a call that you can turn away, right? Like, it has if
Right.
you're made to do something, it's not the
Right.
masculine instinct of it.
You don't exist. Not only
Yeah,
did his father not exist, but he doesn't exist either. And that's I mean this is so vivid how this works. That's shame. In this model that I'm proposing for the instincts, the masculine and feminine instincts, I'm proposing that whether it's a masculine one or a feminine one, whether you're male or female
yes,
biologically, if your core biologic instincts are blocked, never initiated into in the first place, you never became acquainted with them in the first place, or
okay,
they are blocked once you are, or you are traumatized and they are now impaired and blocked,
yes,
which I think is a crucial distinction, the role of trauma, then what do you feel? You feel shame.
yes,
So shame is the absence of masculinity for the male or the absence of femininity for the female. That's what shame is. Shame is a vacuum of
yeah,
those positive energies.
yeah, absolutely. I
And so
mean,
you can see shame in the behavior of Darth Vader,
yeah,
Anakin,
yeah,
everything he does is shameful, and shame based. And it's fearsome. So back to Odysseus, the Odysseus instinct. Then it is a freedom instinct and a discovery instinct and a an adventuring instinct and a novelty instinct, you could say. So it combines the known current research, well established research about risk taking being higher in males automatically, which means instinctually, and novelty seeking in males
yeah, yeah,
is instinctual. So those two things are part of what I'm calling the Odysseus instinct, and it has to have freedom built into it. So if a male is financially unfree, romantically unfree, encumbered by extended family somehow, encumbered by his geography somehow, then he can't truly access this instinct and therefore will feel shame. And the flip side of shame is, guess what? Medusa taught us about it. in female shame, it's rage. It's rage. The flip side of shame,
Yes.
shame is not guilt, right? Everybody knows that. Guilt is a corrective measure that you can at least see and understand, if not accept,
Yes.
that in which you will change your behavior because you have harmed somebody else, and they have let you know that they've let you understand how you've harmed them, and you change your ways. And once you change your ways, guilt should be dropped. Guilt has no further purpose, but shame is a down to the bone level assault of your identity, your very existence, and
Yes.
I would say your dignity. It's an insult to your dignity as a
Bingo.
human. The basic rights of being who you are. And when that is assaulted and you now feel shame, it may last until you A, get trauma treatment, and B, recover, maybe through justice or through unfortunately sometimes through revenge.
Yeah.
It happens, but hopefully through just works of yours, constructive, assertive life building by you, you build yourself better than you ever could have been without the original insult that caused you shame.
Yes.
You
Post
build
traumatic
yourself back.
growth.
Post traumatic growth, right? Well, what is the power aiming outward when you transform from the shame being felt inward to let's use this outwardly now? It's rage. Shame is rage. Rage is shame. They're the same thing.
Yes.
Flip sides of the same coin. Medusa's rage, the snakes in the hair, that's her rage,
Very well put.
which,
Yes.
which was her shame because she was
Yes.
raped by Poseidon, and and her own mentor Athena didn't even bother to come to her rescue, and could have. She was
Mm,
left alone by her own female mentor Athena to be raped. So shame turns to rage, outward rage. That's the snakes. Same for males. Why would males be any different
yeah.
in terms of feeling shame and rage? It
Yeah.
explains a lot. I mean, it
It
explains a lot of
does.
criminology, and none of it is justifying anything. It's just explanatory.
Yes.
It's like, I grew up on a farm where there were groundhogs, and if you trapped a groundhog between where it is and its hole, because you are in between the groundhog and its hole, the thing would attack you like a bear, even though it's a little thing like this, a groundhog.
Yeah.
It would act like 10 times the strength of an animal,
Yeah.
and attack you. That's how I see rage. It's not like it's justified. It is what it is.
Yeah.
It happens in people when they feel shame,
Yeah.
and then the shame gets turned outward.
Well, that's amazing that you bring it up. I mean, with narcissistic personality disorder, of course, I bring that up. There's a lot of triggered rage and like the level. It's almost like hemophilia, the blood disorder where you get a cut and you keep bleeding and bleeding till you die. With narcissistic personality disorder in particular,
Yeah.
a small offense turns into a massive rage response that the offender doesn't even know what they did some of the time, and that only the person experiencing that anger, the narcissist, can really put voice to. But of course, it becomes what the other person did, not, well, I feel shame because I haven't really worked on those sensitive spots like an adult. I mean, you make me think of Cinderella and
Yes.
the when you were saying earlier the shame, and she was treated horribly by her
Right.
stepmother and sisters, and then she got out of it.
Yes.
Like, she got to have her development like through a fairy godmother, but you could say that's symbolism for like discovering how to use her intelligence and femininity in an adaptive
Mm.
way, and she got out of that, right? Out of that lack of dignity, right? The trauma, indignity, female indignity. You got me thinking about that. Well, it looks like the Cinderella story. She was mocked and made to clean and
Yes.
only do
Yes.
domestic duties and no fun, and
Right.
she got out of it. So it was very fascinating. One thing to say that you might find interesting. This is so Anakin Skywalker slash Darth Vader, he becomes massively shamed. That's and he even loses his good looks, his youthful appearance. He becomes this rage monster in a black,
Yeah.
horrifying visage, like Phantom of the Opera, space opera edition, right? That would be a
Right.
good comparison. So,
Yeah.
what else? Well, there's an extended universe of comics, and I remember one that I saw online, like a really cool thing where, so Darth Vader goes to this planet. He has like a vision, and he's tested by the Emperor. And so Darth Vader sees this hallucination or this manifestation of Darth Maul, the horrible red tattooed, creature, evil Sith from the first movie, from the episode one, not the first movie. And he fights Darth Maul in this battle, right? Even though that didn't happen really, it was like a vision of it. And Darth Vader kills Darth Maul, and Darth Maul says, "What did you hate enough to kill me?" Because Darth Maul is like this manifestation of pure anger and hate. And so the dark side operates on a lot of hatred,
Yeah.
obviously. And so he says, "Well, how
Yeah.
could you defeat me? And what did you hate enough to do that?" And Darth Vader says, "Myself," which is this huge mic drop, right? So his inner self-loathing is this source
Wow.
of him being like the most powerful Sith apart from the Emperor. Talk about shame. That's being a shame monster. That's
Wow.
when your shadow side takes over and isn't integrated.
Wow. Wow. Well, hmm.
You lose it all. You lose your wife. You lose your
Yes.
kids. You lose your positive presence. You become disconnected physically and spiritually. I mean, it's all one big amazing metaphor. That's why it's so timeless. And I would even say that the prequels are in many ways too. They just people
You know,
shit on them.
I'm
Jar
not,
Jar isn't my favorite.
you're making me think of, I haven't seen the whole thing yet. I haven't even seen the entirety of the first episode, Adolescence. I mean,
Haven't either. Yeah.
it's kind of fading out. People aren't talking about it as much now. Chris Williamson already has,
Yeah.
um, Rob Henderson has, Diary of a CEO has, but we probably should look at that eventually. But from what I did see, that's the only thing they got right in the story. It's about shame and rage. That even an innocent looking little prepubescent boy, if shamed badly enough, simultaneously has an equivalent amount of rage.
Yeah.
Now sometimes rage is turned on the self, and I think that's what is behind a lot of suicide.
Yeah.
Rage turned on the self.
That
Shame that's deep enough. If shame gets
yeah.
deep enough, if shame is a force of diminishing your dignity and your very existence as having identity and being existent, then if shame heads toward infinity and dignity heads toward zero,
Yeah.
once you hit inversely proportional, once you hit zero, that's the moment of suicide or homicide.
Yeah. Oh,
Same,
yeah.
same thing. It's taking a life. A life has been extinguished by your doing.
Right.
I mean,
Very,
we get
very
real
well put.
philosophical here.
Oh, that's great. That's very well put. I mean, it puts into stark relief our job as therapists because one of my good friends, well, one of my good, I should say, influences, um, someone that I've lately been, reading their work and that I did a presentation for is Peter Limberg of the Stoa, and he's a really good modern day philosopher. And so he talked about like a spectrum of like feminine and masculine professions, and he put like therapists on the more feminine side with the like emotional focus, like emotional processing. I think he's right on what it is in many ways now. I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. But one thing I
Yeah.
find fascinating is there's nothing that says therapy can't be more like life coaching, but there is something that says life coaching can't be therapy, just on the
No.
limitations of their training. No hate, but
Right.
I think
Yeah.
if you look at Freud, you talked about men systematizing and women and being empathic or empathizing. Well, Freud combined the two. I mean, you could say,
There's a richness of synthesizing
yes,
bodies of knowledge, systematized approaches to these things, and just on the fly you synthesizing them and tailoring them and serving them up to the person in just the right way at just the right time with just the right amounts of
yes,
ingredients from these various systems. And
bingo.
that coaching is not that, and not to diss on it, but to define it and differentiate it. Coaching is somebody's taking their personal experience and perhaps things they've read too,
Right.
but not been formally trained at. The Death of Expertise by Tom Nichols, right? That's been People have been talking about that. Rob Henderson's been talking about that a bit too. But Tom Nichols' book is phenomenal about the differences between expertise and, I don't know, self-declaration of authority, let's say.
Yes.
So when somebody coaches, they're doing it out of their own personal self-education and their life's experience,
Yeah.
which could be a valuable thing,
Yeah.
but I think has got to be more narrow in scope than someone trained at various models of therapy and and experienced with synthesizing them together in the right ways.
Agreed. And here's the problem, and I can say this as a therapist. I mean, the issue is, but we therapists really need to know our stuff. And I think what we have to recognize is you get a 2-year master's, okay, and you're not done learning. That's just the beginning. And I think you need to I think you need to love, to be a good therapist, you need to love learning about how the mind works and the models. And the idea of listening to someone and wanting to help is a good, like, the match that strikes, but it's not the fire itself. You need more. And so basically, when you look at Freud, then you listen to that idea of therapy being emotional, and then you hear what you just said on there's basically zero, to use a video game metaphor, when you reach 0 hit points or health points as a video
Yeah,
game character,
yeah,
you die. And so
yeah.
if we learn as therapists that there's an end goal to increase people's passion or vitality. You like the word passion. I like the word vitality or vitalism, because I think the vitalistic school of thought that Gilles Deleuze, the French philosopher, talks about is
They're
very,
the same thing.
yeah, that's very it's
Vitality,
yes.
libido, vitality, charisma, um, masculinity, femininity, passion. They're all the same thing.
We
They're
need
all
it.
synonyms.
We need that. And
Yeah.
we
Life
we need
force, the force, the positive,
yes. Yeah.
the
Well,
positive
this is
force,
a way. So,
the light.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, essentially, therapists need to be aware of what it is they're doing. Yeah, it's listening and caring and asking how people feel. But as you said, it's boosting vitality and passion and charisma, and not charisma in a hollow, narcissistic, aggrandizing, but nothing behind it sense at all. I think people throw the baby out with the bathwater with that. I hate when people think charisma is the opposite of authenticity, because it is most certainly not. And
Right.
when men are taught to not have riz or swagger or anything, and they're taught to be nothing but emotive machines for negative emotions or sadness, that's not authentic for attracting a mate or for attracting friends or whatever. So, and that's not a controversial statement.
I I think just to put it into a sentence, what do people resent about that, about the charisma of others? A lot of the time, I think of Tony Robbins, um, kind of marketing, somebody in marketing who's all about the marketing and comes across as inauthentic because they're marketing, as
Yeah,
opposed to being authentic and just energetically authentic, rather than
yeah.
working hard to sell you something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, so I think people get annoyed at what they perceive to be toxic positivity from
Yes.
certain gurus. And I would say, listen, so you can be emo and you can be negative, and God knows that I am somebody who loved emo music and still do, and love exploring moodiness and being authentic. But at the end of the day, you also gotta have the fire inside that drives you to a healthy sense of realistic optimism. And so, therapists could stand to learn a thing or two about how to market themselves and be excited and show the excitement for positive mental health. I think I've heard tons of people say, not maybe a few, I'll say, enough voices say, well, doesn't it make you a little more interesting to be a little bit toxic or have something to you that's not healed? And I would say, I mean, no, if you can be spicy and show confidence and be mysterious, nothing about that means you have to have an unhealed part. It means you have to know how to show yourself and how to conceal yourself and get to know someone either in courtship or friendship. Doesn't mean you have to be unhealed. And it's sad people
Yeah.
think that. There are people that think that plenty. Being healed and being mentally well does not mean, and I blame our industry to an extent that it seems boring to be good or mentally healed. That's only in
Yeah,
certain.
there's kind of a commoditization
Yeah,
commoditization of impaired minds and traumatized lives,
yeah,
to be served up for, insurance company payments and things like this. That exists. That is true. There also is probably at least more discovered, declared narcissism, as we've talked about before. I think it's driven originally by marketing and
yeah,
publicity and sales technology, and
sure.
the world of marketing to
Yeah.
make us open our wallets over
Mhm.
many decades now, which impairs boundaries, which then makes us more immature and juvenile and instinct based and purchasing instinctually and
Yeah,
impulsively.
yeah.
I think that's where that comes from. There's more narcissism to be seen around you than probably ever before.
Yeah, well, the founding fathers would not they would have said that you need values in a country of freedom, and I come back to that point pretty often, that
Mm,
you need a limit and you need honor. You use that word a lot. You honor, passion. I mean, all these are important words, and you don't hear honor a lot, except maybe, in historical dramas, or it might make people roll their eyes, but I don't think it should. I think, you talk about honoring good deeds that are done in a relationship and remembering what someone's done for you. And I think, the song "What Have You Done for Me Lately?" You've brought that up. I think it's all important that was. I mean, that song was back in the freaking '80s. I think we look at it and we can't
well,
become
that's fear
victims.
based,
Yeah, we can't become victims of marketing, because I would say that's what you become when you only believe
right?
online dating and social media myths about your own greatness and how everyone should bend around you. You've
Yeah.
become a battery, you've become a body in the matrix, just like in the movie. So, do you want to live in a pod and become a unit of power for social media, or do you prefer to have good relationships? Now, this is where I'm going to give a plug to the movie Thunderbolts, one of the best Marvel movies in the past 3 years, probably since Endgame. So Marvel got
Yeah.
it right with this because the characters have to learn to work. It's not a spoiler, it's the whole trailer. They have to learn to
Yeah.
work together. And there's no doubt about they have to do that, and they have to
And
overcome
they're
their
not true
narcissism.
superheroes, right? They're like apprentices or something. They're not
Yeah, and
full on superheroes.
I think that makes it better, because if you watch a movie about, Captain America's good because he's good. And I don't mean that to be rude. Captain America is portrayed as almost having no moral flaw in his character. And how relatable is that? I mean,
Yeah.
so when you look at the characters in this movie,
I
they
I find
remind.
him very relatable.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Well, I would have been interested in hearing you say that, because, or talk about it, because you could. I think he appeals to people. That's pretty funny.
I was joking. I was joking. I was saying I'm so flawless. I relate
That's funny.
to character.
Um,
Never mind.
No, no,
No,
no, it
but
is
that no,
funny.
but
I was so
I
serious
get your
minded.
point.
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I
people
I
need to
get your
see it.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a journey there.
it's like the old study of the male model walks in the Stanford classroom and rate his likability, and he gets a 5, but have him walking again, male model, and he trips and spills his coffee on himself, and his relatability goes up to 8 or 9 or something, right? It's
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
flaws. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, Aramis is hilarious. I love that. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So Aramis, you like Batman. I like Batman. You and I would get along fine on who we like with superheroes. I mean, that's just how that goes. Um, I mean, yeah, but I mean, Batman's not relatable to me as much because I'm not. Or I mean, Batman's an amazing example of trauma creating someone who does it right. I mean, in Batman already, he's so intelligent. That's in added to the cocktail. I mean, I don't want to riff on that too much. I could riff on Batman all day, every day. But, um, when you talk about so narcissism, right? You have to overcome your own biases and your own, I'm going to say it, trauma. And what is the reward for that? Why should you do it? Well, you should do it because if you don't, you will be the eternal infant and you will constantly be disappointed by others because you don't know what to expect of them or yourself. The eternal infant. That is the fate of anyone who becomes a pawn to marketing.
Yeah.
Babies always need bottles and formula. Ah,
Well, and that's what Palpatine was doing to Anakin throughout. He was marketing when he was putting thoughts in his head
yes.
and then
He took
causing
over
him
the
to,
Senate.
yeah,
He took over
it
the
was
Senate.
marketing.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
became a politician, and he knew how to play both sides. Very good point there. That's why he's one of the greatest villains. He's a political villain. He shows what cold, calculating psychopathy looks like. Now, here's the thing: Palpatine was a psychopath, at least. So, narcissist, of course, because he thinks he's better than others. But what he had was the ability to detach and play the long game. And Anakin was too impulsive. He became the bratty um what would you call it? Gifted child. He was the gifted child in the force. He knew he was gifted. He was narcissistic. Narcissistic people are often manipulable by psychopaths. Like that's a lot of the game that we see played out over and over and over again.
Mm,
Is this the
right.
narcissistic person who is nothing but a walking appetite played on by the psychopath who likes to hurt and likes to extract value and is chronically
Mm,
bored and isn't and is
right.
driven by boredom sometimes as much as self-aggrandizement. And
So
so
the narcissist wants what they call supply,
yes.
but the psychopath wants the pain
Yeah, and the power.
in others.
Yes,
And
absolutely. Yes.
mm,
I mean, you give a narcissist a sandbox and they may be happy with it. You give a psychopath a sandbox and they'll probably try to get other people to pay to use it. I mean, I could create better metaphors, but basically, you've got levels of evil and you've got evil that is just like, I want more, or no, excuse me, like well, yeah, I want more and I'm the greatest. I have to keep chasing the high of being acknowledged as the greatest. And you get the evil of, I want to see others suffer and I want to manipulate others because it's a fun game. I want to see how far I can go just because. That's why the Joker's so terrifying. He burns the money in the Dark Knight movie because he can. Whereas if he spent it and became like a mogul, someone who wanted nothing but money, he's relatable to
mm,
most humans probably. But a person who
right,
would want to get all the money and then burn it because they just don't care, they care that little, there's something scary and uncanny and horrifying to most people about someone who cares for almost literally nothing, even their own safety. As you see in Dark Knight, like he plays very fast and loose. He's very
right.
childlike in a exploitative way, and that's the key word for psychopathy is exploitativeness, as we know from antisocial personality disorder, which is the modern day slap, the modern day diagnosis that often indicates
Yeah.
psychopathy.
I,
Exploitativeness.
I like how Aramis just wrote us that Batman took out the entire Justice League in a Tower of Babel storyline.
Yeah, Batman's great.
Um,
He's the
I
anti-psychopath.
like that. In in the parlance I've been proposing, Batman is Hades, the
Yes.
Hades instinct, right?
Yes.
Hades is essentially the first discovered modern proven male instinct, masculine instinct, which is stoicism. It's the ability to go into your own unconscious mind and heal yourself there, um,
Yes.
hidden from others. And it it's not lost on me that through the troubled times of the last 10, 15 years where m- females and males didn't like each other as much, didn't get along for various reasons. There was a movement that was started
Yes.
that was Medusa based and yeah, and just for those who had been harmed and felt shame and then turned it to rage. It's not been lost on me that all of these various public, formerly male populated public places have been like eradicated where there's no such thing as like a men's club or something, like a place where only men can go and only men can belong, not even sports, right? But there's one place that nobody can access. It is not possible. And Viktor Frankl knew of this place. It's in the back cave, in the head.
Okay.
It's the
Very
it's
well put.
the private recesses of your mind. I think Frankl wrote about that with the Nazis could harm your body, they could torture you, they could do all these terrible things, but they could not get completely get into your mind.
Yes.
Not if you didn't let them. That's Batman. That's stoicism and that's Batman and that's the Hades instinct in the male.
I
In the
like that.
female, I guess it would be the Persephone instinct. She's the queen of the underworld,
Well, what
Persephone.
about Megara from the Hercules movie in the 1990s from Disney with James Woods as Hades? Did you ever watch that?
No, what's it called?
Hercules, the movie of the
Oh,
90s.
Hercules. No, I never watched that.
Hello, chat. Please type in the chat if you've seen the 90s Hercules movie because that was
I
my
gotta
first
see that.
exposure to
Huh?
Hades, the god of the
Huh?
underworld.
Yeah,
As a kid, that was out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hades, man. He was such a funny character in the movie. He was a villain, but he was like Jafar, but with the goofiness dialed up to
yeah.
10.
What
Um,
I'm saying is, I'm justifying you and Aramis loving Batman because if Batman is Hades, and if Batman can destroy like the entire Justice League, very, very powerful,
yeah,
I could see that in that the male stoicism instinct, the instinct to go inside your own head where your thoughts are and strategize and plan, or just go silent. If someone's attacking you, go silent, go into your
Batman
own head.
rocks. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
very, very power. It's so powerful. Well, no mortal's ever been allowed in the underworld except Orpheus. So it's pretty powerful since Hades rules the underworld and the underworld represents the unconscious. That
yeah.
going into your own unconscious is one of the most powerful things you can do. But I think at least an equal power, if not, well, let's call it an equal power, is the Odysseus instinct, the instinct to go not into the interior on an adventure, which you could have. I think Batman is on an adventure in the interior, but Odysseus is the instinct to go out into the exterior, the world at large, and have adventure, discovery. They're similar in that way.
Yeah. No, they are very similar. It's interesting. So, one thing I wanted to say on this episode, I'm glad you brought it back to Odysseus. So, I was looking into some Odysseus fact, let's say, and I was looking at his story, and it was like, okay, so Odysseus is on his way home, and as we know, on the ship, and he
Yeah.
gets, Poseidon sends some storms, and he's mad at Odysseus. And I was like, why is Poseidon angry? And it's like, okay, so Odysseus didn't sacrifice appropriately the gods. Okay, he didn't have the right sort of reverence. And I found that interesting because if we look at Odysseus as the everyman's journey, what does that say? Well, it could say that if you don't offer the right respect to your elders when you're on your own mission, you're probably going to get some more pushback. And even if you succeed like Odysseus, it becomes harder than it had to be if you built good bridges and you
Mm,
paid tribute to tradition
yeah.
in an appropriate
You're
way.
the young Turk. You're the
Yeah,
upstart young
yeah,
Turk that
yeah.
offends the older male. Because Poseidon, I think, is representative of commerce,
Yes, he
not
is.
of the sea per se, because he was the god of both the sea and horses. What do horses and the sea have to do with each other? Horses would drown in the sea.
Right. It's
It's that
motion.
they are
It's
both commerce to the
Yeah, they're
ancient
both
Greeks.
travel on sea, travel on horse. I mean, to yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
So Poseidon is the marketing god,
yeah.
the god of commerce, let's say,
So
and
I thought we got it.
Odysseus is the upstart, right?
Yes.
So it's old money being angry at bourgeois.
Well,
Um,
as Robert Greene says, avoid envy at all costs, right? One of the laws of power is to avoid envy, avoid provoking it when you can.
yes,
And there's
yes.
ways to do that. I think um and I saw we got a movie recommendation there to see Count of Monte Cristo. I would say if you haven't seen it,
I'm not going to do it.
okay.
I've been warned about that. The
Well, you
new
should
Count
watch.
of Monte Cristo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know nothing about it. But when you talk about the gods, I can't believe I haven't said this until now. But Neil Gaiman wrote and I know he's been a subject of a lot of controversy, so I'm not endorsing
All
him. But
right.
what the American Gods TV show was actually really interesting. And when we talk about gods, you can see the old um, and I think there's a combo. I think it's mostly Norse. And there's all kinds of gods on there from a pantheon, but,
Yeah.
um, when you're bringing this up, I'm thinking of, okay, Poseidon was god of commerce. Well, so there's one the god of, the new god of basically globalism, the global world of commerce is Mr. World, and he's played by Crispin Glover, who, as we know
Ah.
in Back to the Future, is an amazing actor. He's so he does such quirky performances sometimes. I love him. He's just awesome. So he's really good as this new god
Oh man.
that threatens the old ones. And it's a very metaphorical, as you'd imagine, show. And I haven't actually seen the final season, but the first one was really fascinating,
Hmm.
and that'd be interesting for us to analyze because like you look at like there's a storyline about some of these new gods that arose because of mankind's changing activity, basically telling the
Yeah.
older ones like, well, you guys need to move over. Like things are changing. Like there's a technological god portrayed as this impish young man, and he's like he has no respect for tradition or what came before. So and it plays out, and you see him basically muck up stuff. Um, Techno Boy, I think he's called in the show. It's very fascinating because that's an apt sort of force in our world today. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway,
I guess that I want to back to the Greek gods or any pantheon or any mythology that you want to draw on for nomenclature and understanding of our instincts,
yes.
including our biologically driven ones, masculinity and femininity themselves. One thing I never doubled back to that you mentioned was how Luke Skywalker kind of has this asexual, unromantic, no romantic life really throughout the first film because
Mhm.
we find out it's his sister. So Han
That's a
Solo,
bummer
it is a bummer,
for
but
him.
what it reminds me of as well is that Luke kind of represents a lot of the hero's journey. Maybe involves becoming initiated into all these various masculine instincts, and not just the Odysseus instinct for freedom, adventure, and discovery and
Mm.
novelty seeking, but it. I recall that Apollo, the Renaissance man instinct of becoming learned, learning lessons, also, which by the way is Spider-Man. The analog is Spider-Man, my favorite superhero. Um, Apollo has a sister, Artemis, who's the female equivalent. They have the same nature, and they're brother and sister.
Okay.
I
Amazing.
absolutely concede the nature of Princess Leia as sister to Luke Skywalker's Apollo, the young student learning how to first even barely start to become a Jedi Knight,
I love
where
that.
his sister is on a similar path and they're brother and sister. And you see this all throughout the Greek deities. They
Who
always
cares?
have pairings of a husband and wife who have similar superpowers, a brother and sister who have similar superpowers,
True.
or two lovers that have similar superpowers. One is
Yes.
male version, one is female version, but they accomplish similar things for the individual as superpowers. So I
Who's your
thought that was
Spider? Go ahead.
worth mentioning. I
Who's your
thought that was
Spider
worth
Man?
mentioning.
Tobey
Who's my spy?
Maguire. Who's your Spider Man
Oh,
actor?
who's the best Spider-Man?
Yep.
It's probably Tobey Maguire. Yeah,
Man, that was a nostalgic series for me. I mean,
yeah,
I think they all brought something different. I think Maguire was the best Peter Parker. Garfield was the best Spider-Man, possibly. I mean, Tom Holland's great. I don't know. Tom Holland probably does a good job of the both, like the Peter Parker persona and the Spider-Man. It's
yeah,
kind of a, they're all great in their own ways. It's interesting how Iron Man becomes the mentor to Spider-Man, and they both have kind of that Apollo
yeah.
uh nature. So you've got like the mentor to the younger version of that, like the quipping genius technologist dynamic of the older one who made mistakes, trying to help the younger one be better. And you see that in the Marvel movies after. That's one thing they have over the original Spider-Man movies is they can have all the other Marvel pantheon.
Oh, right, right. Yeah,
But I like
yeah.
this. I think this is yeah.
I
Go
mean, I
ahead.
like Iron Man too, but uh, Iron Man and Tony Stark. It's like the modern billionaire, Silicon Valley tech genius who's already made his money, and that's cool and that's interesting, and it's something to marvel at the technology. But Spider-Man I like, and the reason Spider-Man was created by
Yeah.
Stan Lee, right? Yeah, Stan Lee.
Right. Yeah.
Was there was a market need for a superhero of appeal to teen boys, specifically teen boys, because they're in between childhood and adulthood, and it was to encourage them to go to college, to become educated, the Apollo instinct to become a scholar, a student
Yeah.
was the appeal. Um, but anyway, I just thought it was worth noting that there's always a masculine and feminine analog in both the Greek pantheon, and I think it's teaching us, males and females, neither is better than the other or more powerful. They're equally powerful, but they have, you know, shades of difference between how they employ whatever, call it a superpower or whatever instinct needs to be brought to bear against the uh, whips and scorns of time and the oppressor's wrong and all the Shakespearean descriptions of the troubles of life. We bring our instincts to bear. That's what initiation even is.
Yeah.
Initiation, and it's why I think it's the fourth imprinting process that
Right.
humans go through, because we initiate into our lifelong peer group that we are going to be a part of, where we were brothers at arms and we fought the war together.
Yes.
We went to medical school together, we learned psychology together, whatever it is we went through together, we did it together, and it's our peer group, usually in a profession, but it could also be becoming a mother and linking with all other mothers through
Yes. This
that
is
that challenge.
yeah.
But that's what initiation is. It's a do or die situation where you must whip out your superpower that maybe you knew you had but never used, or maybe you didn't even know you had it, but you discover it to save the day for yourself and others in a troubled period of your life. That's initiation. And that's
Yeah.
what the superheroes are for, and that's what our instincts do.
Yeah.
Each one of them is a superpower for a certain scenario in life, already encountered or not yet encountered, or
Yeah,
maybe you can't even be conceived of yet,
I
but
mean,
you will find out. You'll find out
when you
how to
look at
survive it.
when you look at EMDR training, and I love being a part of teaching the next generation of EMDR trauma therapists how to wield the tools and the protocol and how to bend it when you need to, as is appropriate, and how to stick to it. And it's an apprenticeship model. You become an apprentice in it, a knight, and a master when you teach it. And so
Yeah.
that comes to
Yeah.
mind for me, that initiation. We don't have enough of those. I mean, it's so isolated, and so many therapists practice alone, only remote, which I have nothing against if you only have a remote practice. I know overhead's a lot. I know everyone doesn't have good rent for office space. It just we're all so atomized. And so without community and communal apprenticeships and rites of passage, you don't really build an identity the same way. I think again that
Right.
goes back to Star Wars
Right.
with being a Padawan and an apprentice and a knight and a master, a Jedi,
All
right?
right.
Like
Right.
what is it like when you find a purpose and you know where you are with it? What happens when that gets shaken? Do you cling to it? Do you leave the Jedi Order because someone in it failed you? I mean, that's such a telling metaphor for many people in many professions or
Yes.
identities where they don't have a good mentor figure. That's been a big thing for me. Like, why do people go to therapy? Why is therapy replaced so much? And I know, so my again colleague Peter Limberg talks about therapy as existing because there's not these sort of Aristotelian moral friendships with accountability involved.
Right.
And I
Right.
agree with that, but I also think, crucially, it's because people don't have mentor figures or others who even helped them know the things to be an ethical friendship, I think is the term he uses, an ethical friend
Yeah.
to others. They don't have that. They
Yeah.
didn't receive the parenting in that way or the model from you know, and it sounds silly almost maybe to people, but like a scout leader, a pastor, a priest, a rabbi, whatever, a teacher in some capacity who left that
Friendship based
impact.
in virtue.
Yeah.
At the highest level of friendship with the Aristotelian friendship based in virtue is higher than the friendship just based in pleasure
Yes.
or utility.
Yes. And sadly, we're a utility relational society right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
We've
I think
deteriorated to that.
yeah. Well, and I mean, you become atomized, packaged, sold as your
Yeah.
own good, you know? And
Yeah.
there's something to be said for individualism, and there's something also to be said for having community, and it's our job to figure out now how to do both. So, I think
I
that's a
think
good
it's true too that you know some of us have found friends who are so of such goodness and also such intellect that just talking to them can feel like therapy and work like therapy, even if they are not a therapist. I think some people do that. I think many males and females both go to their friendships
yes.
for healing. And it's part of what friendship does. Heals us, mutually heals us. Well, listen, thank
Yeah,
you for being here. Yeah, thanks for the really rich talk. Wasn't expecting all
thank
that.
you. I
I didn't
love
know
it.
you knew all that about the Star Wars mythology. That's
Appreciate
amazing.
you for prompting it from me because I can have some clips now and some very fun things to say. And by the way, another mic drop. When you talk about having the cave of the mind, the rich interior world, by the
Yeah.
way, EMDR and therapy and other trauma reprocessing teaches you to cultivate positive mental states that only you have
Yes.
access to. The calm place, the safe place, the inner advisor. A lot of that
Yes.
tries to build in what people didn't have before.
That's like
So,
building all of your component technology into your own personal Batcave.
oh yes, and I have
Yeah.
more. I want to leave a teaser. You made me think of something I'm not going to share in this episode of another really good character who I want to
Aw,
add to our pantheon, and I want to
thanks.
talk a little
Thanks,
bit.
Gerald.
I'm really excited. Thank you. Yes, Gerald. I'm really excited to talk more about how I think EMDR and other work fits into this model of the instincts because and it's going to blow everybody away. I think because as you were talking, and I really want to get this out and do a little, and maybe we can talk back and forth on this subject. And I think I'm going to try to go live tomorrow and set a reminder or something. But yeah, I appreciate this. This is amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh yes, thank you.
All right. Back to your bat cave, Jeremy,
You
where you
know
can
it.
devise new syntheses.
I love Batman.
All
Thank you.
right.
All right.
Thank you guys.
Thanks everyone.